True mental clarity in later life is defined not by the absence of forgetting, but by the absence of fear when one does. We are conditioned to accept that significant memory loss after 60 is a biological certainty, a steep and unavoidable decline. Wayne Dyer's work consistently challenged these deterministic limits. Dyer demonstrated that the mind possesses profound capabilities for self-repair and clarity, accessible through a structured shift in perception. This exploration follows that framework, examining how a simple change in daily intention can fundamentally alter the experience of aging and cognition. The tyranny of expectation, the cultural narrative surrounding aging, is powerful. It suggests that crossing the threshold of 60 activates a script of inevitable decay. Memory, in this script, is often portrayed as the first and most prominent casualty. This narrative is reinforced by jokes, media portrayals, and even well-meaning conversations that equate normal lapses in recall with the beginning of a serious decline. People begin to expect their minds to fail, and this expectation becomes a heavy burden. It creates a state of hypervigilance, where every minor cognitive slip is seen as proof of the inevitable. Wayne Dyer viewed this accepted narrative as the primary obstacle, not biology itself. He argued that the collective agreement on cognitive decline becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When a society universally accepts a belief, that belief exerts a tremendous force on its individuals. In his perspective, the mind, particularly the subconscious mind, accepts these cultural instructions. If the instruction is people over 60 become forgetful, the mind begins to organize itself around that reality, filtering perceptions and even shaping physiological responses to match the belief. This mechanism operates through well-documented psychological principles. One is stereotype threat. When an individual is part of a group stereotyped as bad at something, their performance in that area often drops. This happens because a portion of their cognitive resources is diverted. Instead of focusing on the task, they are busy monitoring their own performance, worrying about failure, and trying to disprove the stereotype. This internal friction consumes working memory, leading to the very failure they were trying to avoid. Thus, the belief in memory loss actively creates memory deficits. Consider the common scenario of misplaced keys. A person in their 40s misplaces their keys and attributes the event to being busy, distracted, or stressed. They might feel annoyed, but they do not question their fundamental cognitive health. A person in their late 60s misplaces their keys, and the internal monologue is often entirely different. The immediate thought is, "This is it. I'm losing my memory." The event, which is identical, is interpreted not as a simple mistake, but as a symptom of age-related decline. This interpretation, this attribution of the event to aging, is the crucial difference. It immediately triggers a fear response. This fear is not neutral. It has direct biological consequences. The fear response to proving the stereotype correct releases stress hormones, most notably cortisol. While cortisol is useful in short-term crises, chronic exposure, which can result from persistent anxiety about health or memory, is neurotoxic. It specifically damages the hippocampus, the very region of the brain responsible for forming new memories. The fear of memory loss, therefore, creates a feedback loop that actively worsens memory. Wayne Dyer's perspective suggests the first step is not to train the memory with puzzles or games, but to starve this fear. This involved a conscious refusal to participate in the cultural narrative of decline. This is the I am principle. Dyer emphasized that statements following I am are treated as commands by the subconscious. Continuously saying I am getting forgetful or my memory is failing is an act of programming. The 60-second habit, in its first application, is about changing this programming to I am alert and clear or my mind is strong. This psychological framework does not dismiss the reality of organic disease. It is not to say that all cognitive decline is purely a matter of belief. Biological factors, nutritional deficiencies, lack of sleep, and genuine neuropathology like Alzheimer's disease exist and require medical attention. Dyer's work does not replace medical evaluation. Instead, it addresses the vast, untapped territory of the mind's influence on the brain. It focuses on the massive gap between normal, age-related changes and the catastrophic decline that people fear. It separates the fear of decline from the actual incidence of it. Understanding this distinction between biological reality and cultural expectation is often the first step toward regaining cognitive confidence. The true habit, therefore, begins not with brain games, but with dismantling this expectation. It requires a conscious withdrawal from the collective agreement that aging equals cognitive decay. This act of internal rebellion is foundational. It clears the ground, allowing for a new set of beliefs and, consequently, a new biological reality to be built. This shift alone can feel difficult. The cultural programming is strong, and the occasional senior moment feels like powerful evidence against this new belief. Simply not believing in decline is a passive stance. It is often not enough to overwrite decades of conditioning. A more active, focused, and structured tool is required to consciously reprogram a mind. This is where the specific 60-second practice becomes essential. What cultural belief about my own abilities am I accepting? The 60-second manifestation, this proactive tool, is the 60-second habit itself. At its core, it is a disciplined, 60-second act of deliberate and focused intention. This is ideally practiced upon waking, before the mind is cluttered with the news, emails, or the anxieties of the day. In that quiet liminal state between sleep and full wakefulness, the subconscious mind is understood to be most receptive to new programming. The habit is about seizing this moment to set the cognitive and emotional tone for the entire day. Wayne Dyer's work is anchored in the principle, you get what you think about, whether you want it or not. Most individuals, he observed, live reactively. Their first thoughts upon waking are often of worry, obligation, or dread. They review their problems, which programs the mind for a day of stress. The 60-second habit is a direct intervention. It is a commitment to proactive thinking, shifting the focus from what is feared to what is intended. The mechanism for this can be understood through the brain's reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS acts as the brain's filter, sorting through the billions of bits of sensory data received every second and deciding what to present to the conscious mind. It is the reason a person can hear their own name spoken in a loud, crowded room. The RAS is tuned by belief and intention. If the 60-second intention is my mind is clear and sharp today, the individual is tuning their RAS. The brain begins to preferentially notice evidence of clarity, such as recalling a name easily or focusing on a complex article. Simultaneously, this habit leverages the principle of neuroplasticity. The brain is not a fixed, static organ. It is constantly rewiring itself based on experience. The 60-second habit can be seen as a form of highly focused, brief meditation. This repeated, intentional firing of neural pathways associated with clarity, peace, and confident recall serves to strengthen those specific pathways. The adage neurons that fire together, wire together applies directly. The 60-second habit is a daily reinforcement of the desired neural architecture, building a stronger highway for clear thought. Wayne Dyer often taught that as you think, so shall you be. For him, this was not a metaphor, but a literal description of reality. He saw thoughts as a form of energy that precedes and creates physical manifestation. The 60-second habit is a practical application of this philosophy. It involves marshaling one's mental energy toward a specific, desired outcome, memory health, instead of scattering that energy through undirected worry. It is an act of taking creative control over one's own mental environment. An applied scenario looks simple. An individual wakes up. For the first minute, before checking their phone or getting out of bed, they sit quietly. They close their eyes and visualize their day unfolding with mental ease. They might see themselves in a meeting, clearly articulating a point. They might picture themselves reading a book and absorbing the information. They mentally affirm, "My mind is strong, my memory is reliable, and I am grateful for my clarity." This practice sets the emotional and cognitive baseline for the day. This practice, however, is not a magic spell. This is a critical limitation. Simply wishing for a better memory for 60 seconds while maintaining a lifestyle that destroys the brain will not work. Dyer's work is holistic. It assumes the individual is aligning their whole self. The 60-second habit is the steering wheel, but the engine, the biology, still requires proper fuel and maintenance. If the individual is severely sleep-deprived, eating inflammatory foods, and living in a state of chronic stress, the 60-second habit will be overwhelmed. To understand its power, one must contrast it with the default 60 seconds. The average person often wakes up and immediately reviews their worries. "My back hurts. I have that stressful meeting. I hope I don't forget what I need to say. I am so tired." This default state also programs the reticular activating system. It tunes the brain to find evidence of pain, stress, and failure. The 60-second habit is about consciously choosing the alternative. Furthermore, the 60-second intention must be paired with the feeling of clarity. Dyer often spoke of feeling the wish fulfilled. The visualization in the scenario is not just a dry, visual exercise. The person must feel the gratitude of having a clear mind. They must feel the confidence of easy recall. It is this combination of a clear thought and an elevated emotion that makes the subconscious mind respond most powerfully. This daily practice, repeated over weeks and months, fundamentally retunes the mind's filter. It shifts the baseline state from anxiety and fear to confidence and calm. This new baseline has profound biological implications. But the practice also raises a critical question. What happens when, despite this daily intention, a genuine memory error occurs? How does this framework handle the inevitable failures that life presents? When did I last consciously direct my first thoughts of the day? Belief made biology the connection between the 60-second intention and the physical brain is the critical midpoint of this journey. This is where Wayne Dyer's spiritual concepts connect directly with the longevity niche's focus on physical health. The bridge between the two is the hard science of psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics. These fields demonstrate that the mind is not a passenger in the body, but a key regulator of its biological processes. Dyer's premise was always that the unseen world of thought and intention actively organizes the seen world of the body and health. He viewed the body not as a static machine that simply breaks down with time, but as a dynamic, flowing process of intelligence, constantly responding to consciousness. The 60-second habit is a tool to direct that consciousness, and the body listens. The first mechanism is epigenetics. Our DNA is not a fixed blueprint that dictates our destiny. Above the DNA, API, are marks that tell our genes when to turn on and when to turn off. These marks are placed and removed in response to environmental signals. Critically, our mental and emotional state is a primary environmental signal. The 60-second habit, by inducing a state of calm, gratitude, or confidence, changes the body's chemical environment. This can signal inflammatory genes to remain off and genes related to cell repair and cognitive health to remain on. A second, more direct mechanism involves brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This protein is often called miracle-grow for the brain. It is essential for supporting the survival of existing neurons and encouraging the growth of new ones, a process vital for memory. High levels of the stress hormone cortisol are known to inhibit BDNF production. The 60-second habit, by shifting the body from a threat state, sympathetic nervous system, to a repair state, parasympathetic, creates the optimal conditions for BDNF production. This is the core payoff. The 60-second habit is therefore not just positive thinking. It is a direct biological intervention. Wayne Dyer's insight, now supported by this science, was that the state of mind is the most potent lever an individual has over their state of body. By spending 60 seconds in a state of gratitude, peace, or intention, The person is actively changing their hormonal and genetic expression for the day. This is a profound shift from seeing the mind as a victim of aging to seeing it as a director of health. Consider an applied scenario. Two individuals, both 68, decide to learn a new, complex skill, such as a musical instrument or a new language. One holds the Dyer-inspired belief, "My mind is plastic and capable of learning." The other holds the common cultural belief, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks." The first individual's brain, when practicing, is flooded with dopamine, reward, and lower cortisol, enhancing BDNF and synaptic plasticity. The second individual's brain is inhibited by performance anxiety, cortisol, and the nocebo belief, which actively slows the formation of new neural connections. There are, of course, limitations. This process does not cure all genetic predispositions. A person with 2 copies of the APOE4 gene, which confers a high risk for Alzheimer's, cannot think that gene away. However, science has shown that lifestyle and, increasingly, mental state epigenetics can profoundly influence whether and when that gene expresses. Dyer's work addresses this massive area of influence, giving the individual agency back within the bounds of their biology. It shifts the focus from what I am fated for to what I can control. The realization that our internal monologue is not just commentary, but biological instruction shifts the entire dynamic of aging. This framework explains the placebo and nocebo effects in a practical way. The 60-second habit is, in essence, a structured, daily, self-administered placebo. The placebo, from "I shall please," is the body's innate healing system responding to positive expectation. The nocebo, from "I shall harm," is the senior moment fear, which is the body's stress system responding to negative expectation. The link is clear and direct. Mindset is not separate from health. It is a key regulator of the biochemical processes that define health and longevity. The 60-second habit is a simple, accessible tool for regulating that regulator. It is the first step in actively sculpting the biology of the brain, rather than passively accepting its perceived decline. This understanding empowers the individual to take responsibility for their own mental environment. What biological instructions am I sending with my current worries? Reframing this senior moment, the inevitable test of this new framework arrives. The 60-second habit is established, the biological benefits are understood, but a memory lapse occurs. The individual is in a conversation and cannot recall a familiar neighbor's name. This moment, where reality seems to contradict the new belief, is the pivot point. The brain's old programming and the new intention collide. The default reaction is the nocebo effect. The internal voice says, "See? It's not working. The decline is here." This one minor lapse is allowed to invalidate all the positive work. This triggers the cortisol loop, T1, reinforces the old belief, and weakens the new identity. If this reaction wins, the entire framework collapses, and the person reverts to the cultural narrative of fear. Wayne Dyer's work provides a powerful tool for this exact moment, often illustrated through the Zen parable of the empty boat. The story goes, if a person is crossing a river in a boat and is struck by another boat, their reaction depends on one thing. If they look and see a person in the other boat, they become furious, shouting and blaming. But if they look and see that the boat is empty, they are not angry. They simply adjust their course. The event is identical. The attribution of intention changes the emotional response entirely. Dyer explained that the memory lapse, forgetting the name, is the empty boat. It is a neutral neurological event. It is not an attack by a force called aging. It is a momentary retrieval failure. This same event happens to 20-year-olds who are sleep-deprived, 30-year-olds who are multitasking, and 40-year-olds who are stressed. The senior moment panic is the act of putting someone in the boat. The individual attributes the event to a malevolent, intentional force called aging and responds with fear and anger. The real-time application of this framework is cognitive reframing. The 60-second habit, T2, builds the baseline, but this is the active defense. The individual must learn to see the lapse as an empty boat. Instead of the internal monologue, my memory is failing, the reframe is, my brain is filtering billions of bits of data, and that name wasn't prioritized for retrieval right now. How curious. This neutral, non-judgmental observation neutralizes the emotional, cortisol-driven response. Let's look at an applied scenario. A 70-year-old woman is telling a story and loses a keyword. She feels the hot flush of embarrassment and anxiety. The old script, T1, begins. I sound old. I am failing. But she has practiced this new framework. She pauses, takes a breath, and smiles. She does not apologize profusely or panic. She may say, the word has escaped me, and then calmly continues her point a different way. She does not internalize the event as evidence of decline. The boat was empty. It is crucial to apply this limitation. This technique is for transient, everyday lapses. It is not for significant, persistent, or frightening neurological symptoms. Confusing the two can be dangerous. This reframe is not for disorientation, forgetting the names of close family members, or an inability to manage daily affairs. Those are signs that require immediate medical evaluation. The empty boat reframe applies to the normal cognitive friction of a complex, busy brain, not to genuine, progressive pathology. This reframe is supported by neuroscience. Memory is not a single location, like a video file. It is a vast, distributed network. Forgetting a name, a failure of semantic memory retrieval, can happen while procedural memory, how to ride a bike, and emotional memory, a feeling for childhood, are perfectly intact. A lapse is almost always a failure of retrieval, not storage. The data is still there. The connection is temporarily busy or blocked. The empty boat reframe acknowledges this. Wayne Dyer's work was always about self-acceptance, not superhuman performance. The goal is not to have a perfect computer-like memory. The goal is to be at peace with the mind one has. Reframing the lapse is an act of self-compassion. This compassion, by lowering the stress response, ironically creates the optimal state for memory retrieval. The name, once the pressure is off, often floats back into consciousness minutes later. By neutralizing the fear of failure, the mind is liberated. It is no longer spending a huge portion of its energy monitoring itself for decline. This changes the relationship with memory from one of adversary to one of ally. It moves the entire process from managing a deficit to cultivating a strength. This piece is the sharpened mind. What empty boat am I filling with negative meaning? The identity of an ageless mind, the journey from fear to intention culminates in a new identity. We have moved from identifying and rejecting a cultural script of fear, T1, to installing a 60-second daily intention, T2. We have explored how this intention creates tangible, biological change, T3, and we have learned how to handle inevitable lapses with neutral, compassionate observation, T4. The final step is the synthesis of all these parts. The 60-second habit is not just a habit. It is the building block of a new identity. The goal is not to be a person over 60 who is doing tricks to improve memory. That identity is still rooted in the assumption of deficit. The goal is to be a person with a clear and vital mind. The 60-second habit, practiced daily, reinforces this I am statement until it replaces the old one. The habit becomes the proof, and the proof builds the belief. Wayne Dyer's ultimate teaching often pointed beyond the mind itself. He urged individuals to identify not with their body or even with their mind, but with the observer. This is the timeless, conscious awareness watching the mind and body. From this perspective, aging is something the body does, but the observer, the true self, does not age. It does not get sick. It does not forget. It simply witnesses. This psychological and spiritual shift provides the ultimate resilience. A memory lapse, from this observer perspective, is just another event in the field of consciousness. It is something the observer notices the mind doing. There is no panic because the self is not threatened. The identity is not a failing mind. The identity is the observer watching a mind that just had a retrieval error. This detachment is the final antidote to the fear of decline. In a practical, applied scenario, a person practicing this framework approaches their 70s and 80s. They still engage in longevity habits. They eat well, they exercise, they stay social. But they do so not from a place of fear of staving off dementia, but from a place of respect and care for the physical vehicle. They learn new things, not as a brain game to prevent loss, but out of genuine curiosity. Their 60-second habit is no longer an intention to fix a problem, but a 60-second moment of gratitude for the clarity they are experiencing. This fulfills the promise from the beginning. The sharpened memory is the result of this journey. It is a mind sharpened not by an absence of errors, but by the absence of fear. It is a mind unburdened by the common enemy of cultural expectation. It is a mind that, in Wayne Dyer's view, has claimed its own power. It is no longer reacting to scripts, but is actively creating its own reality. This identity shift is, of course, the most profound and challenging part of the work. It runs counter to a lifetime of conditioning. It is the work of a lifetime, not a weekend. To identify as the observer is simple in concept, but difficult in practice, especially when faced with physical pain or significant loss. It requires constant, gentle reminding. The longevity niche often focuses exclusively on the physical. It measures telomeres, tracks inflammation, and optimizes diet. Wayne Dyer's work provides the essential, missing piece, the why. A person who believes they are a decaying machine has very little motivation to care for that machine. A person who believes they are timeless consciousness, the observer, has every motivation to care for the physical vehicle they're using to have this human experience. Ultimately, Wayne Dyer's perspective suggests that the 60-second habit is a gateway. It is a moment of remembering. It starts as an intention to remember names, facts, or where the keys are. But with practice, it deepens. It becomes a moment of remembering one's true, limitless nature. In that remembrance, the fear of aging and the anxiety over memory find no purchase. What timeless part of me am I ignoring?